Um, Let me jump back to all three different products, different areas. Um, but when you kind of develop a product, it's very much first how do you get to a minimal viable product. How do you make that first bit, right? Like how do you actually do it? You just have to do it. How do you make like a prototype? So actually with Libby, I made a, a, a complete kind of cardboard and a 2x4s prototype before I got to this, like just to kind of see how the lights would work and what the sizes needed to be. For review, there is a process when you're doing software. What you really want to do is you want to storyboard things. You want to look at how is the whole scenario going to play out. And typically as a non-technical founders, it's really key to actually draw and talk through all those scenarios. And I will jump into one of the examples in a little bit when we kind of talk a bit more about design process and things of that nature. So that's kind of one of the key things is how do I get to my minimal viable product, which also means that I need to cut a whole bunch of things which I thought are useful. So you really want to think about what's the key thing you want to showcase to your customer and get feedback from. This is not something you're going to put out as a finished product. So something along that. The second key thing when you do product is around task management. Typically you're not going to have all the skills you need to develop something. So you really want to be able to have a very effective way of working with people. So a lot of people, typically in the software world, use a process called a Scrum to do task management. But it's also been effective in a lot of other industries. It was primarily borrowed from manufacturing industry. But I think we have one of the tools being given to the students, right, for task management.
Yeah, we're going to use Progressly, but there's a whole bunch of
Correct, there's a whole bunch of it.
Yeah.
So I'll show you one example of a tool I love called as AHA. It kind of helps you walk through the exercise of what's your strategy, what's your vision, what's your goal, but then how do you day to day take your tasks and map to that. So that's very key when you're doing product is how do you do task management. The third important thing is about, and there is nothing less about it, it's spec. This is one thing which anyone can do, and anyone should do a good job of it. When you especially start, you probably might not have the skill sets to go find a graphic designer. You might not have a skill set to find a marketing person, or you might not have a product yet. But you need to be able to write down what your product does, how it will do it in a couple of pages. So actually that was key in building Libby. So that was one of the things I did, was I was very precise in writing down what I really want this thing to do, how it should look, what dimensions it should have. And I didn't have any laser cutting skills, neither did I have skills to kind of figure out other stuff. So I had to be very precise about that to figure out, I want interactive furniture is not enough. I need to be able to say which furniture this should be. So, just to even find out whether we should build a chair or a table, I did user research. We call like 10 bars, hey, would you buy a chair or a table? And ask them. And that was for real. So my initial hunch was that, I'm going to build a chair because I thought it's always cool. You sit on a chair and it turns on and but people were like, no, I would pay for a table. And why would you pay? Well, it's a piece of art, and every restaurant, every social place pays a lot of money to have something which looks cool. And then the other big problem, which they will tell you, is we spent a ton of money just figuring out this lighting of this place because we don't quite know how the ambience should be. Wouldn't it be cool if the ambience were programmable? So these things you kind of key out in kind of figuring out that initial spec, and that spec is also not something you sit and write yourself, but you want to be involving your customers, going out, talking to people. That's really key, is you cannot do it yourself. You have to go talk to people and just, just get their feedback so you are able to justify what you're writing. So that's key, is a good spec is about being precise, and it is being precise in collecting feedback as well as collecting quantitative feedback, so you can figure out what you want it to be. It's not good enough to say, I want to do X. You want to be precise. And then the next thing is, when you kind of go through the spec, and then this comes back to the life cycle, because this is the life cycle aspect of it, you will always come to that point where you're like, this could be this and it could be this, and I can sell it to fashion, like the alcohol, we could sell it to fashionistas and teenagers and so on and so forth, right? Like whichever way you want to put teenagers. If it's Europe, right?
Yeah.
Save myself there. So the key thing there is coming back to what's the minimal viable product, and in terms of like how are you prioritizing it for that minimal viable product, right? So if you have 15 things you want to build, are you prioritizing them in the right way? So that's sort of, it seems like product is a little bit of an exercise in figuring out what your list of things you need to build should be. It's not something you one day kind of wake up with, where if you are like Steve Jobs, but he also goes through 8 years of cycle, right? Like until like he figures out. So it's kind of very important to have that life cycle mentality, prioritization mentality, kind of being able to get feedback. So let me give you an example of what this process is like for one tool. So this is sort of it's a demo I use sometimes. So this is like you're developing a cycling company and you're selling cycles, and you have like an adventure cycling company. So this kind of walks you through the whole process. I'll kind of touch on key things, right? One is, what is it that you're trying to do? So what is the vision of it? Like, what is the vision? Here are social fitness cycling application and associated with stores. We have, and then what are our strengths? We are experts in fitness and cycling. Then you want to think about who you are selling it to. You are selling it to competitive cyclists or recreational users, so on and so forth. Just kind of give you a feel for it. You kind of look at that, but these are just like your vision, right? This is what you want to look at it. But for each of the visions, you need to have a goal, right? So the goal is, I want to be the #1 social fitness cycling application. We want to triple our revenue year over year. You want to be the top rated application, so on and so forth. But these goals don't mean anything until you have concrete actions you are taking against them. So, I also follow this process at work. So what you do is, you create initiatives which align to those goals, and then there is a multiple ways you can look at it, but this is a simple way which, it's sort of a SWOT in a way, but it is essentially what you're trying to do when you look at this is, what is my least hanging fruit? What is my minimal viable product? So, I can make a lot of progress on all my goals if I enhance in this application my tool the challenge coverage, because my users, where this application is being sold, all of that, all the numbers tell me, this is going to give me the most bang for the buck.